Bacon grease cookies. You scrape the last bit of drippings from the tin on the back of the stove, the one with a lid that never quite fit, where all the bacon grease pooled after breakfast. Back then, nothing was wasted, not even grease, especially not grease. And so you made cookies. You didn't have butter, hardly anyone did, but bacon grease, that you had. Saved it from every pan, strained it through cheesecloth, let it cool into a creamy white slab, then scooped it by the spoonful into a bowl with sugar, flour, and just enough baking soda to lift it. If you had an egg, you used it. If not, you didn't. Vanilla was optional. A pinch of salt, that depended on how salty your bacon was. You'd roll the dough by hand, soft and a little sticky, and press it flat on an old cookie sheet lined with brown paper or reused wax wrap. Into the oven they went, the heat pulling up the smell of breakfast and dessert at the same time, a little smoky, a little sweet. When they came out, they were golden around the edges, soft in the center. The first bite surprised you. Not savory, not meaty, just rich, deep, with a hint of salt that made the sugar pop. Kids loved them. Adults understood them. They were a statement. We can still have joy, even when it tastes a little like yesterday's breakfast. They kept well in tins, layered with newspaper or a scrap of cloth. And when guests came by, rare as they were, you offered them proudly, because you made them. You didn't need butter. You needed grit and a spoonful of grease. You made these with bacon fat, someone might ask, and you'd smile, just a little. Sure did. And while the cookies cooled, the kettle boiled, time for coffee or something close to it. Coffee grounds grits. You used the grounds once, poured hot water through them slow, and drank the bitter brew in silence. Then, instead of tossing them, you saved the damp clumps in a dish on the stove, because the day wasn't over, and those grounds still had work to do. Next came the grits. Not creamy, not cheesy, just plain cornmeal, boiled in salted water until it thickened into a soft, pale mound. Filling, yes, but flavorless. So you stirred in the used coffee grounds, just a little at first, then more. The smell changed, richer, earthier. The color darkened, like wet soil after rain. The grits thickened even more, the bitterness cutting through the bland starch and giving it depth. Warm, smoky, and strange. You didn't eat it with sugar. You ate it with a spoon and a quiet nod, because it filled your belly, and that was enough. This was survival food, fuel. It wasn't supposed to taste like a cafe. It was supposed to keep you moving, and it did. One old man called it mud porridge. Kids called it grumpy breakfast, but every bowl got cleaned. Still bitter, someone might ask, spooning it slow. Still working, you'd say. And before the kettle cooled, you were boiling something new, with no fruit, no filling, just memories and make-do sweetness. Vinegar disinfectant spray. You didn't have Lysol, you barely had soap, but you had vinegar, and somehow that sharp little bottle did the job. It sat on the windowsill, cloudy with age, crusted at the rim, catching the sunlight like it held something sacred. Inside was a homemade potion, vinegar steeped with herbs you pulled from the yard or borrowed from the neighbor's patch. Mint, thyme, a sprig of rosemary if the summer hadn't burned it dry. No labels, no brand, just something your mother swore by, and her mother before her. You'd boil the herbs first, letting the steam fill the kitchen with the smell of green things, then pour it into the vinegar bottle and let it sit for days. The longer it sat, the stronger it got. Sharp, pungent, but clean. And back then, clean didn't mean shiny. It meant safe. You didn't need a plastic spray bottle. You used what you had. An old soda bottle with a nail-punched cap, a chipped cup, and a rag. A tin sprayer, if you were lucky. That vinegar wiped down the cutting board before dinner and the table after. It cleaned doorknobs, lunch pails, buckets, and anything that looked like it might carry a cold. You sprayed it on apples before slicing and rubbed it onto a wooden spoon after stirring stew. When someone in the house started sniffling, you made another batch. Stronger this time. You'd steep extra herbs and maybe add salt or lemon peel if there was any. You wiped every corner, every handle, even the edge of the stove. Kids hated the smell. They'd crinkle their noses and complain. "It stinks in here, Ma," and you'd smile, wiping again. "Smells like we're not getting sick." Because vinegar was cheap. It didn't spoil. It didn't need a label. And in a time when doctors were far away and medicine cost more than groceries, that bottle was your best defense. You didn't need bleach to feel like you were protecting your family. You just needed something strong enough to bite back back at germs, something you made with your own 2 hands. Neighbors would knock, asking for a bit. "You still got some of that vinegar mix?" they'd say, and you'd pour them a jar, no questions asked. It wasn't about sparkle. It wasn't about shine. It was about doing something when everything else felt out of your control. And when the floor was clean, the windows wiped, and every surface had that vinegar bite to it, you'd finally sit. Pour yourself a cup of something hot. Wrap your hands around it and feel, for just a moment, like the storm outside couldn't touch the safety inside. Even now, that smell might take you back to linoleum floors, to a kitchen scrubbed clean, to a house that didn't have much, but still had rules, still had order, still had pride. Because in the Dust Bowl days, disinfectant didn't come from a store. It came from a jar on your windowsill, brewed by hand and backed by love. And maybe that's why it worked. Boiled egg coffee hack. It wasn't fancy, it wasn't normal, but it worked. And if you've ever tasted gritty, bitter coffee that made your mouth curl, you might understand why someone would crack a raw egg straight into the pot. During the Dust Bowl, coffee wasn't just a luxury, it was a ritual, a lifeline, and sometimes the only comfort a person had all day. But fresh beans were rare, filters were expensive, and cream, that was for the rich. So folks got clever, really clever. You'd start with whatever coffee you had, sometimes old grounds that had already been brewed once. Dump it into a dented kettle or tin pot. Then came the strange part, 1 raw egg, shell and all. You'd crack it gently, letting the white and yolk slide into the mix, then crumble in the crushed shell right behind it. It looked like a mess. But once that pot hit the fire and started to boil, something amazing happened. The heat caused the egg white to cook, and as it did, it latched onto the floating coffee grounds, wrapping around them like a net. The grounds clumped together and rose to the top in a soft mass. The crushed shell helped cut the acidity, and the yolk melted into the brew, giving it a smooth, rich texture that surprised anyone who dared to try it. This wasn't some backwoods joke. It was a real method, one that came from Scandinavian immigrants, passed down from grandfathers to sons, and then adapted by Depression-era families desperate to stretch every bit of flavor. You'd let the pot simmer, stirring once or twice, then slowly strain it through a dish towel or just ladle it out carefully. No filters, no gadgets, just a steady hand and a little know-how. What you got wasn't fancy, but it was better, darker, gentler on the stomach, and surprisingly good. A strange sort of earthy richness clung to every sip, mellowed by the egg, with none of that burnt bite. Some folks added a pinch of salt, others sweetened it with sorghum, sugar, or molasses, if they had any, but even plain, it warmed you from the inside out. 1 cup could carry a man through a whole morning of digging ditches, hanging laundry, or praying for rain. Kids were warned not to watch too closely. "That's grown-up magic," folks would joke, and in a way, it was. "Did you really put an egg in that?" someone might ask, eyeing the cup suspiciously. "Sure did," you'd say with a grin, because it wasn't about wasting food, it was about chemistry, heritage, and holding on to something real when the rest of the world was falling apart. You see, when you lose your land, your job, your crops, you hang on tight to the little things, and sometimes that little thing was a cup of coffee that didn't taste like mud. Boiled egg coffee wasn't just a hack, it was a lesson in patience, thrift, and pride. You didn't need fancy machines or baristas, just hot water, old grounds, and 1 precious egg that pulled double duty. And maybe, just maybe, that's what made it taste so good. Because in a world where everything was being taken away, that warm mug in your hands meant something still belonged to you, even if it was just a strange, silky cup of coffee.